Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, I want you to close your eyes for just a second. Imagine you're looking at a map of the United States. You know the shape, the coasts, the Great Lakes. Now zoom in. Zoom in on the east, right down the spine of the continent. We're looking at the Appalachian Mountains. West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, ancient, green, full.
The oldest mountains on the entire planet.
Exactly. And, usually when we talk about this region, whether it's on the news or just, in conversation, the script is pretty predictable.
Oh, yeah.
We talk about coal, we talk about energy, jobs. Maybe we'll touch on pollution in a really general sense, smog, maybe some dirty water.
Sure.
But today we're throwing that script completely out the window. We have a stack of research here that is, well, it's going to fundamentally change how you see that map.
It really does. I mean,
Yeah.
we aren't looking at this through the lens of economics today or even like standard environmentalism.
Mhm.
We are looking at it through a source text that's titled The Necro-Geography of Appalachia.
Necro-Geography. I have to admit, when I first saw that title, I thought, okay, are we reviewing like a horror movie? It sounds incredibly dark.
It is dark, but in a very specific academic way.
Mhm.
Necro comes from the Greek for death. Geography is the writing of the earth.
So literally, the writing of death.
The writing of death onto the landscape.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the source argues that what's happening in Central Appalachia, specifically with mountaintop removal mining, it isn't just pollution.
Yeah.
It's not an accident. It's not a side effect of doing business.
Right, we always hear that term externalities, like, oops, we made a mess while we were making money.
Exactly. This source just flips that on its head. It frames the destruction as a deliberate functional feature of the system. It uses the term geocide, the murder of the earth itself.
Yeah.
And it argues that this entire region has been turned into what it calls a sacrifice zone.
That is a heavy concept, a sacrifice zone. It implies that for the rest of the country to live the way it does, for the lights to stay on in New York or for the air conditioning to run in Atlanta, this specific place has to die. And not just, die a little bit. We are talking about the total decapitation of mountains that have been standing there for 300 million years.
The scale is just, it's really hard to wrap your head around. But to really understand why this matters, why we aren't just talking about rocks and trees, we have to start with a concept the source introduces. It's called the metabolic rift.
Okay, let's unpack this, because metabolism is something I associate with my body, I eat a sandwich, my body processes it, I get energy. What is a metabolic rift?
That's a perfect analogy, actually.
Exactly.
Think about the earth like a body. In a healthy system, there's a cycle of exchange, a metabolism.
Yeah.
Humans take from nature food, fiber, water, and then they return waste to nature, which is then recycled into new life.
So the closed loop.
It's a closed loop. That is a healthy, social, ecological metabolism.
It breathes in, it breathes out.
Right. Now, a rift is a rupture, a break in that cycle. This concept actually goes back to Karl Marx, who was reading the work of an agricultural chemist named Liebig back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
They were worried about soil nutrients being shipped to cities as food and just never coming back to the fields.
Okay, so a one-way street.
But in Appalachia, the source argues this rift isn't just about nutrients, it's geological.
Geological, how so?
It's a rupture in the rock itself. The source describes it as an inversion of stratigraphy. It's like turning the earth inside out.
That sounds like a line from a disaster movie.
Well, think about what a mountain is functionally. It's a carbon sink, right? It's covered in forests that absorb CO2. It has soil that holds water. It is fundamentally a stabilizing force.
Okay.
When you blow the top off for mountaintop removal, or MTR as they call it, you are taking rock that has been buried for eons, stable rock, and you're exposing it to the atmosphere. You are turning a carbon sink into a carbon source.
So we're not just breaking the cycle, we're actually putting it in reverse.
Precisely. And the mission for today's deep dive is to trace the consequences of that reversal. Because the source material makes this incredible argument that nothing is isolated. We're going to trace a line from a tiny salamander habitat in a West Virginia hollow all the way to a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico.
And from a legal deed that was signed in the 1890s to the actual DNA of children being born today. It's a massive web.
So, okay, let's start at the beginning. Before the dynamite, before the bulldozers, let's talk about the victim. What is actually being destroyed? Because I think for a lot of people, if you haven't been there, you just picture woods, generic trees.
It is so much more than just woods. We are talking about the mixed Mesophytic forest.
Necrotic.
It just means moderately moist. But the significance here for this, we have to time travel. We're going back to the tertiary period. We're talking 65 million years ago, right after the dinosaurs checked out.
Okay, so deep time. Right. And then fast forward a bit to the ice ages, the Pleistocene. You have these huge ice sheets coming down from the North Pole. They bulldoze most of North America. They scrape New England to the Midwest. They just flatten everything. But they stop,
They ran out of gas.
essentially.
Yeah.
They stopped just short of these central Appalachian coves or hollows, these deep protected valleys in West Virginia and Kentucky.
So while the rest of the continent is being scrubbed completely clean by ice, these valleys were, what? They're just kind of hanging out.
They were acting as an evolutionary ark, a refuge. While everything else froze or got ground into dust, these coves preserved a lineage of plants that is incredibly ancient. And that is why the biodiversity there is just off the charts compared to anywhere else in the temperate world.
Give me a comparison. Like, what are we talking about?
Okay, so if you go to a forest in the Rockies or even parts of Europe, you might see a forest that's dominated by 2, maybe 3 types of trees, oak and pine, spruce and fir.
Right.
In the mixed Mesophytic forest, the canopy is shared by over 30 distinct tree species.
30. Just in the canopy.
Just in the canopy. Beech, Kula poplar, sugar maple, magnolia, white oak, red oak, basswood, and, before the blight, the American chestnut. It is a biological relic. The source calls it a library of life that survived the Ice Age.
That's a beautiful image, an ancient library. And like any good library, it's not just about the big structures, right? It's about the specific valuable things that are hidden inside. The source talks about the pharmacopoeia of the hollows.
This is where the loss becomes really, really tangible for the people who live there. The understory of these forests, the forest floor, is a living pharmacy. These plants have evolved in this stable, ancient environment for millions of years to produce very specific chemical compounds.
And the big celebrity here, I'm guessing, is ginseng.
Panax quinquefolius,
Mm-hmm.
American ginseng. And I know what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can buy ginseng tea at the grocery store.
Right, or you see those farms, the ones with the black tarps over them.
And this is where the source makes a fascinating distinction. You can farm ginseng, yes, but the source calls wild Appalachian ginseng elite germplasm. It is pharmacologically superior to the farm stuff.
Why? Is it something in the dirt?
It's the struggle.
The struggle?
Yeah. On a farm, the plant is pampered. It gets perfect water, fertilizer, shade, so it grows big and fat and watery. But in the wild, in that rocky, competitive forest floor, the plant is stressed. It has to fight for nutrients. It interacts with these complex fungal networks in the soil. And that environmental stress forces the plant to produce higher concentrations of ginsenosides.
And those are the active compounds, the good stuff.
Exactly. Those are the adaptogens that help humans deal with stress.
Mm-hmm.
The plant becomes potent because it lived a hard life.
That is. Wow, that's almost poetic. So when we farm it, we're essentially creating a weak copy.
A very weak copy. And when you blow up the mountain, you destroy that specific set of conditions, the shade from the canopy, the soil fungi, the drainage that makes the elite version possible. You can't just go replant it on a reclaimed mine site. It won't work. The library's been burned.
And it's not just ginseng, is it?
Oh, no. There's golden seal hydrastis canadensis, which is a powerful natural antibiotic. There's black cohosh actea racemosa, which is critical for women's reproductive health. And the source points out something really interesting about black cohosh. It relies on very specific pollinator interactions.
Those are specific bugs.
Specific bugs that only live in that specific forest. If you flatten the forest, the bug is gone. If the bug is gone, the black cohosh can't reproduce. The chain is just broken.
So we're talking about the plants, but I want to talk about what they're growing in, the dirt. Because the source gets really technical about the soil structure, and it calls it a sponge.
Yes. We tend to treat soil like it's just stuff, inert matter. But in these ancient forests, the soil is a piece of technology. Think about it. For thousands and thousands of years, huge trees have grown, died, and fallen over. Their root balls rip up the earth. They decay. This creates what they call a pit and mound topography.
So the ground isn't flat, it's lumpy.
Extremely lumpy and deep and full of organic matter. This creates what the source calls a hydrological capacitor.
Okay, you're using physics terms on me again. A capacitor that stores energy in a circuit.
Exactly. And this soil stores water. When it rains, and it rains a lot in Appalachia, that lumpy, deep organic sponge just absorbs the water instantly. It holds it and then releases it very, very slowly into the streams.
Ah, so it acts like a regulator.
It does 2 critical things. It prevents floods during big storms, and it keeps the creeks running during droughts. It regulates the flow. And when MTR happens, the source describes the removal of this soil as a functional lobotomy of the landscape.
A functional lobotomy.
You are removing the brain that regulates the water cycle for the entire region. You strip away the topsoil, you blast the rock. Now, when it rains, there is no sponge. The water hits hard, compacted rock and runs off instantly.
Which leads to flash floods.
Insane flash floods that wipe out towns, followed by bone-dry creek beds a month later. The regulation is gone.
That image lobotomizing the mountain, that's going to stick with me.
Yeah.
So, okay, we have this ancient, complex, self-regulating ecosystem, the arc of the tertiary. Now, let's talk about the murder weapon. How exactly do you conduct geocide? Because the source breaks down the mechanics of mountaintop removal, and it is just industrial-scale violence.
It's not just digging. It is a systematic process of dismantling. Step one is deforestation. But they don't always send in loggers to carefully harvest that valuable timber we just talked about.
Which would seem to make sense economically, right? If you're going to destroy it, you might as well sell the wood.
You would think. But often, time is money. So the biomass, those ancient oaks, maples, magnolias, is often just bulldozed into huge piles and burned. Or it's just treated as spoil. It's seen as an obstacle to get to the coal, not a resource in itself.
That's heartbreaking, literally just burning a library.
Step two is the blast. And we aren't talking about little sticks of dynamite like in a cartoon. They use a mixture of ammonium nitrate and fuel oil. The source notes that the scale of explosives used in Appalachia rivals active war zones.
Every day.
Millions of pounds of explosives every single day, just shattering the bedrock.
Which leads to step 3, the swell factor.
Yeah.
This is a physics problem that dictates everything else that happens.
I loved this part.
It's so counterintuitive. You break a rock, and it gets bigger.
Think about a bag of popcorn. Before you pop it, all the kernels lay flat and dense in the bag. Once you pop them, explode them, they fill up a huge bowl. You cannot fit that popcorn back into the original bag.
Because of all the air gaps between the pieces.
Exactly. When you blast solid sandstone and shale into millions of boulders and rocks, the volume expands significantly. It's called the swell factor. So you've blown up the top of the mountain to get to the coal seam, but now you have all this puffy rock. You can't put it back on the mountain. It literally will not fit.
So you have a surplus of mountain. Where does it go?
And that is step 4, valley fills. They take that excess rock, the overburden, the spoil, and they dump it over the side into the adjacent valleys. They bury the hollows.
And the source says over 2,000 miles of headwater streams have been buried.
Yeah. To put that in perspective, that's like driving from New York City to Denver, and the entire road is a stream that has been buried under hundreds of feet of rock, just gone.
So what happens to the flat part that's left on top, the so-called reclaimed land? Because the mining companies always run those commercials showing green fields and elk running around. They say, we put it back better than we found it.
And that is what the source calls the green desert illusion. Yes, it looks green from a satellite, but if you walk on it,
What does it feel like?
it feels like concrete. To prevent landslides, which is a huge risk, they have to compact that loose rock. They run steamrollers over it until it is dense. Then, because no native tree can get its roots into concrete, they use these hydroseeders to spray a slurry of alien grass.
Like what kind of grass?
Lespedeza cuneata, festuca, aggressive non-native grasses that are just tough enough to grow on rock.
So you end up with a monoculture.
You end up with a golf course on top of a parking lot.
Yeah.
And the source calls this arrested succession. A real forest evolves, right? Grass leads to shrubs, shrubs to pines, pines to hardwoods. But on these mine sites, the native seedlings can't root. The alien grass chokes everything out. The ecosystem is frozen in this artificial state forever. It's a zombie landscape.
Speaking of zombies, that brings us to the chemistry. Because the water that comes out of these valley fills, the source calls them zombie streams.
This is where we get into the chemistry of the rift. And this is the part that honestly terrified me the most because it's invisible.
Right. We've all seen the pictures of acid mine drainage. That bright orange water, rusty rocks, we know that's bad.
And that is a huge problem. That comes from pyrite pools gold oxidizing in the air and creating sulfuric acid. But the source highlights a different and maybe more insidious danger. It's what it calls the acid-base paradox.
Okay, walk me through this.
So you have this acid forming in the rock piles. The mining companies, and nature itself, try to neutralize that acid using carbonate minerals that are also found in the rock, things like limestone.
Basic chemistry. Acid plus base equals neutral. That sounds like a good thing.
It creates water that has a neutral pH. It looks crystal clear. But the chemical reaction between sulfuric acid and carbonate releases two things. First, it releases inorganic CO2.
Wait, I must have missed that on my first read. So the rock itself is releasing CO2 just by reacting.
This is carbon geogenics. We worry about burning coal.
Mm.
But the source argues that simply by blasting the rock and exposing it to air and water, the rock piles themselves literally exhale CO2. The entire mine becomes an open-air geochemical reactor.
So even if we never burned a single lump of the coal that came out of there, just the act of digging it up causes emissions.
Massive emissions. And the second thing that's released by that neutralization reaction, dissolved ions. Calcium, magnesium, sulfate. The water coming out of the valley fill might look like pure mountain water, but if you measure its conductivity, its ability to carry an electrical current, it's off the charts.
It's liquid rock.
It's essentially liquid rock. And for a fish or a mayfly or a salamander, this is deadly. It completely disrupts their osmoregulation.
I remember osmosis from high school biology, water moving across a membrane to balance things out.
Right. A fish is this delicate balance of fluids inside its body versus the fluids outside. If the water outside is supersaturated with dissolved minerals, it basically sucks the water out of the fish or forces minerals in. Their cells just can't handle it. The stream looks beautiful, but it's chemically dead. No bugs, no fish. A zombie stream.
And then there's the selenium.
The signature poison of MTR. Selenium is a naturally occurring element, but MTR concentrates it. It bioaccumulates up the food chain. And it is a potent teratogen.
Teratogen. That means monster maker, right? It causes birth defects.
Correct. The source describes fish larvae in these streams. And they aren't just dying. They are being born with severe spinal curvatures. Their backbones are bent into S shapes. They're born with two heads or missing eyes.
That is absolutely horrifying.
It's not just toxicity in the sense of poison. It's a fundamental corruption of the biological blueprint. And this water doesn't stay in the mountains. It flows.
Which brings us to continental synergy. I think this was the biggest aha moment for me in the entire text. We tend to think of Appalachia as this isolated, remote place. Oh, that's a problem for them over there in the mountains.
But gravity exists, and water flows downhill. The Ohio River drains these mountains. The Ohio then feeds the Mississippi. The Mississippi feeds the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay, so let's trace the bullet. Let's follow a single molecule of sulfate from a mine site in Kentucky all the way down to a dinner plate in New Orleans.
Okay, so imagine a rainstorm on a valley fill in Kentucky. The water trickles through that crushed rock, picking up sulfates, that byproduct of the pyrite oxidation we talked about. It enters the zombie stream. It flows into the big sandy river or the Gandat, then into the Ohio, then into the Mississippi.
It was traveling thousands of miles.
Thousands of miles. Eventually, it hits the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the Gulf has these infamous dead zones, hypoxia, where there's no oxygen. We usually blame fertilizer runoff for that, and that's part of it. But the source points out a very specific interaction with mercury.
The metal-mercury connection.
In the sediment at the bottom of the Gulf, there are specific kinds of bacteria called sulfate-reducing bacteria, SRBs. And as their name implies, they eat sulfate.
And we just sent them an all-you-can-eat buffet from Kentucky.
Exactly. We are supercharging them. And when these specific bacteria digest sulfate, they have a metabolic byproduct. They take the elemental mercury that's already present in the environment, and they methylate it. They turn it into methyl mercury.
And why is that methyl part so important?
Because elemental mercury, if you swallow it, mostly just passes through you. Methyl mercury is sticky. It binds to proteins. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's an incredibly potent neurotoxin.
And it moves up the food chain.
The bacteria are eaten by plankton. The plankton are eaten by shrimp. The shrimp by small fish. The small fish by a big tuna. And at every single step, the concentration gets higher and higher. It's called biomagnification.
So just connect the dots for me one more time.
By blowing up a mountain in West Virginia, you are releasing sulfates that flow 1,000 miles to feed bacteria in the Gulf of Mexico, which then create the specific neurotoxin that ends up in your tuna sandwich.
That is, the interconnectedness is just terrifying. It's a continental scale poisoning system.
That is the metabolic rift
Yeah.
in action. You cannot break one part of the system without sending these shock waves through the whole thing.
I want to pivot now to the human side of this. We've talked about the fish, the trees, the Gulf, but people live right next to these mines. Section 6 of the outline calls this the human filter.
It's a grim term. If the river is the artery for the waste, the human body becomes the final filter for the contaminated air and water. The source relies heavily on the work of an epidemiologist, Dr. Michael Hendricks. He started asking a very simple question. Are people who live near these mines sicker?
And for a long, long time, the industry answer was, well, yeah, but they're sick because they're poor, they smoke, they have bad diets.
That was the standard deflection. It's a lifestyle problem. But Hendricks did the math. He controlled for smoking, he controlled for obesity, he controlled for poverty. He compared MTR communities to other non-mining Appalachian communities that were just as poor and had the exact same smoking rates.
And what did he find?
The MTR communities had significantly higher rates of lung cancer, heart disease, and kidney disease. The correlation was just undeniable.
So what is actually making them sick? If it's not the cigarettes, what is it?
It's the air. When you blast a mountain, you create these huge plumes of dust. But it's not just dirt. It's what scientists call particulate matter. It's silica dust, which is basically ground up glass. It's heavy metals like cadmium and arsenic. And it's ammonium nitrate from the undetonated explosives.
So you're breathing in a chemical cocktail every single day.
And so fine PM 2.5 is the size that it passes directly through the membranes in your lungs into your bloodstream. It doesn't just affect the lungs, it causes systemic inflammation throughout the body. But the most disturbing finding, and this is hard to talk about, is the transplacental toxicity.
This brings us right back to the fish with the crooked spines. It's happening to human babies.
The rates of birth defects, specifically heart defects and neural tube defects, are significantly higher in MTR areas. The contaminants are crossing the placental barrier. The fetus is literally developing in a toxic environment.
And the source takes this one step further, one step into the future. It calls it the epigenetic shadow. This sounds like science fiction.
It's the cutting edge of biology. We used to think genes were set in stone. You have your DNA, that's your blueprint, end of story. But epigenetics is the study of the switches that turn those genes on or off.
And the environment can flip those switches.
Yes. Heavy metals like arsenic and cadmium have been shown to alter DNA methylation. They can, for example, switch off a tumor suppressor gene, or they can switch on a gene that's associated with chronic inflammation.
Okay, so that affects the person who's breathing the dust right now.
But here is the shadow. These epigenetic marks can be heritable. They can be passed down to sperm and egg cells.
So, wait, you're saying if I breathe in this dust and my genes get switched around, I can pass that switch to my child.
And potentially to your grandchild. The source calls this intergenerational violence. A child born 10 years from now, long after the mine is closed, might be born with a biological predisposition to disease because of what their grandmother was exposed to.
So the industry isn't just taking the coal, they are leaving a debt. A biological debt that will take generations and generations to pay off.
It creates a molecular cycle of poverty and illness.
That makes me incredibly angry, and it makes you wonder, how is this legal? How was this ever allowed to happen? We have to go back to the political architecture, Section 4.
The source frames this whole thing as internal colonialism.
Which is a very strong term. Usually we think of colonies as being overseas somewhere.
But the dynamic is identical. You have a core, the wealthy industrial centers, the banks in New York, the factories, and you have the periphery, in this case Appalachia. The role of the periphery is to supply the core with what it calls negentropy, organized energy.
Coal.
And in exchange, the core sends the periphery entropy, waste, pollution, poverty, social decay. The wealth leaves, the damage stays behind.
But the argument is always it creates jobs. We hear that constantly. The war on coal is a war on jobs.
And the source just demolishes that argument. It calls it jobless growth, and the numbers back it up. The shift from underground mining to mountaintop removal was a shift from labor to capital.
Explain that. What does that mean?
Underground mining requires men, lots of them. You need people to dig, to shore up the roof, to run the shuttle cars. It is labor intensive. MTR is capital intensive. It relies on massive, expensive machinery.
Like that huge dragline excavator.
A machine the size of an office building. It cost $100 million, but it's operated by 2 people with joysticks. MTR allows a company to extract more coal with a fraction of the workforce. So production went up, but employment absolutely crashed.
So they destroyed the mountains and the jobs at the exact same time?
Exactly. It broke the economic link that once existed between the mine and the community. You don't need a thriving town full of workers anymore. You just need a few operators and a whole lot of explosives.
And to make this all happen, they needed the law on their side. I want to talk about the broad form deed. This is what the source calls the legal weapon.
This is a genuine tragedy of history. Picture this. It's 1890. You're a subsistence farmer in eastern Kentucky. You have 100 acres. You grow corn, you have some pigs, you hunt in the woods. A man from the city comes by. He's wearing a nice suit. He offers to buy your mineral rights.
And you think, Well, I can't get to the coal. It's 500 feet down. Sure, give me 50 cents an acre.
Right. The farmer thinks they'll dig a little hole, go underground like a gopher. My farm is on the surface, my house is on the surface, nothing changes for me. The deed separated the land into two different estates, the surface estate and the mineral estate.
But then the technology changed.
50, 60 years later, the companies come back with giant bulldozers. They say, we're coming for our coal. And the farmer's grandson says, you can't. You'll destroy my house. You'll destroy my cornfield.
And what did the courts say?
The courts ruled in favor of the companies. This was the judicial betrayal. The courts established the principle that the mineral estate is dominant.
Dominant.
Meaning, if you own the coal, you have the implied right to do whatever it takes to get it. And if the only convenient or necessary way to get it is to completely destroy the surface, then the surface owner just has to deal with it. They have no recourse.
That is insane. That would be like if I sold you the rights to the pipes under my house and you decided the best way to fix them was to bulldoze my living room.
And the court told you, sorry, his right to the pipes is dominant over your right to the living room. It was compared to the English Enclosure Acts. It was a legal mechanism designed to strip people of their land to service industrial accumulation. It severed the people from the land just as the blasting severed the top from the mountain.
This leads to the final form of destruction. We've talked about the land, the water, the body, the law. Now, the mind. The source uses this term epistemicidio.
Epistemicide, the killing of knowledge.
This brings us right back to that ancient library concept. If you burn the library, you don't just lose the books, you lose the ability to even read them.
In Appalachia, cultural identity is deeply, deeply tied to the physical land. This is the commons. People know where the ginseng grows. They know which spring runs cold in August. They know the shape of the horizon. It's a cognitive map.
It's how they navigate their world and their history. That's the ridge where my grandpa shot the bear. That's the hollow where we always gather mushrooms.
Now, imagine a mining company comes in and literally erases that ridge. They fill in that hollow. The physical referent for the memory is gone.
The map in your head no longer matches the territory outside.
Exactly. You can't pass that knowledge down to your grandson because the place where that knowledge lived doesn't exist anymore. It's been flattened. The knowledge becomes obsolete.
The source uses a word for the psychological impact of this. Solastalgia.
This is a term coined by the philosopher Glenn Albrecht. We all know nostalgia. That's the pain of being away from home. You're in a new city, you miss your old house, but you can always go back.
That's solastalgia.
Solastalgia is the pain of being at home while your home is being destroyed around you. You haven't moved. The environment has moved away from you.
That is profound. It's a feeling of complete powerlessness.
It is existential trauma. And the source links this directly to the mental health crises in the region. When you lose your landscape, your connection to the past, and your economic future all at the same time, that trauma seeks an outlet. The opioid epidemic didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in a place where the world was literally being dismantled.
It's incredibly heavy, but we can't just end on the despair. We have to look forward. The outro of the source discusses the future. Because coal is dying, right? The economics are shifting.
Coal is crashing. But the source warns about a new trap. The mindset of extraction hasn't changed. The new buzzword is rare earth elements, REs.
The stuff we need for electric cars, wind turbines, iPhones.
Right, and it turns out coal waste, those acidic, toxic piles, are actually rich in rare earth elements. So there's a big push now to go back and reprocess the waste.
On the surface, that sounds good. Hey, let's clean up the mess and get batteries out of it. A circular economy.
That's the pitch. But the source warns of greenwashing. If we frame this as just a new mining boom, it justifies keeping the toxic infrastructure in place. It justifies leaving those waste piles there so we can harvest them later. It continues the colonial dynamic.
So Appalachia just stays the raw material supplier. First it was coal for steam engines, then coal for power plants. Now it's rare earths for Teslas.
And the local people are still left with the holes in the ground and the health costs.
So what is the actual solution? The source calls for metabolic restoration.
It's a call for deep healing, and it breaks it down into three parts. First, ecological. We need more than just hydroseeding grass. We need to actually reforest with native species to restart the carbon and water cycles. We need to rebuild the sponge.
That sounds expensive and incredibly slow.
It takes centuries, but it's necessary. Second is juridical restoration. Land back, ending the dominance of mineral rights. giving the surface owners and the community real sovereignty over what happens to the ground beneath their feet.
And the third.
Epistemic restoration, valuing local knowledge. Listening to the people who actually know the land, rather than just the engineers who know how to blow it up. It's about rebuilding the culture alongside the forest.
It's a massive undertaking, but the alternative is leaving that rift open forever.
Precisely.
We're going to leave you with a final thought from the source material. This is something that really stopped me in my tracks, the concept of fractured time.
It's the ultimate summary of the metabolic rift. Think about the timescales we've discussed today. We are burning coal, which is sunlight that was trapped 300 million years ago. To get it, we are destroying a forest ecosystem that has evolved over millions of years, that tertiary relic.
So we are burning the deep past to destroy the ancient past.
And in doing so, via epigenetics and teratogens, we are creating health defects that will last for generations into the future.
The industry is consuming time itself, past, present, and future, all incinerated for a single moment of energy.
It is a sobering reality. But looking at it directly, seeing the full scale of that rift, is the only way we can even begin to figure out how to close it.
This has been intense, but I think I'll never look at a map or a mountain the same way again. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.